So the arrangement reached with the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs over the weekend to acknowledge land title rights doesn't settle the fate of the controversial Coastal GasLink pipeline. The hereditary chiefs opposed to the pipeline say they're still opposed to it after this weekend. The company building it says it is resuming construction on the project that had been paused while the weekend talks took place. And one railway blockade, it remains in place near Montreal in support of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. There are some 20 elected band councils, we should note, including Wet'suwet'en band councils, who have signed agreements in support of the pipeline. One of those band councils that wants this project to go ahead is the Burns Lake Band. And the elected chief of that band is Dan George, and he's with me in our studio now. Chief George, good to see you. Thanks for coming to speak with me.
Great to see you, too.
It's good to get your perspective on what's going on here. First of all, start by telling me a little bit about the band and the people you represent, and about the pipeline. Will it pass through your territory?
Yes, it does pass through our territory. But Wet'suwet'en territory only covers half of our traditional territory. The other half of our traditional territory is Karasakani. So where the pipeline actually runs is Karasakani land.
Okay. Tell me about the people you represent. And are some of the members of the Burns Lake Band, some are Wet'suwet'en?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
And okay, so as you watch this conversation, which has sort of monopolized the national debate here for all kinds of different reasons, about this pipeline, about some of the blockades and protests, what have you been thinking as you watch this conversation unfold?
Well, a lot of it is that our voices aren't being heard, and what hereditary chiefs have been having clan meetings, but we haven't been invited to any of those clan meetings. They're choosing and picking who support them to come to these meetings. So we need to have all of our membership included in some of these meetings. And how do we do that? Because we have members that live all across the province and all across the country. So how do we include them, as their voices need to be heard also?
So you think that that the voices of those who want this project and who who want to have a say and have had a say in this project are not being heard?
Yes, I believe that most of our Wet'suwet'en people are not being heard, and they're scared to go to those feast halls because they get bullied, and so we need them to have a voice somehow in all of this, and we all need to decide together as Wet'suwet'en people.
Okay, why do you want this pipeline?
Because it gives us a lot of benefits for the Burns Lake Band and the whole community of Burns Lake, because we're a logging town, and we have the mountain pine beetle in northern BC that's devastated 80% of all of our pine in BC. So logging's going down quite a bit. So either we're going to live in a ghost town pretty soon, or we need some other economic development to try and keep this thriving communities, especially in small communities.
Okay, and what difference will actually, you talk about, I suppose, the declining economy of your town. What difference will this pipeline make? Well, specifically to you, tell me about the benefits it will bring to your band.
Well, right now we've got language programs going on because of some of the benefits that we already have received. So we can hire people to revitalize our language. We've got a lot of socio-cultural activities going on. We built star blankets. They're making moccasins right now. So we're doing a lot of cultural stuff that we couldn't do before because we didn't have the money to do it. So we're introducing our culture and cultural activities back into our communities.
Okay. We had this agreement on the weekend, a tentative agreement to have the governments, BC and the federal government, work to finally recognize land title rights. What do you know about the details of the agreement? Because we're hearing it'll have to be considered by all of the Wet'suwet'en people, decide whether or not they want it. Do you expect to be included in those conversations, or the people that you represent, are you expecting them to be included in the conversations of what this tentative deal means?
Well, I would hope so, because it's part of our land also, as being a Beaver Clan member, and through the Beaver House, it's part of our tradition also. So we need to be included. I haven't seen the agreement yet, so I'm not sure what's in it or what's involved in it.
Okay, so if there's an agreement, and that sounds like what this is, to recognize the land title rights, in particular of hereditary chiefs, What do you think of that? What impact could that make if that relationship, as was essentially decided by the courts 23 years ago, that this needed to be recognized and dealt with? What impact do you think that will have on the decision-making process? Because for a lot of Canadians watching, that's what this has become. It's become a question of who gets to decide, hereditary chiefs or elected band councils.
Well, I'm totally willing to work with the hereditary chiefs, and through Delegate Muck said you had to create this governance system. They have created 6 chairs for elected chiefs. I'm not quite sure where the 6th chair is from, but there's 5 of us that have signed on, and they're supposed to create a governance system through that, but we have never been involved in creating this governance system in the last 25 years since Delegate Muck started.
Okay, but to the fundamental question, can you have a system? Here we are today. Who should be making decisions on these kinds of projects? Elected band councils or hereditary chiefs?
Well, I think we all need to work together as a nation. So all Wet'suwet'en Nation need to come together and decide everything together.
Okay, so these hereditary chiefs who oppose the pipeline, they want to block it. They want it stopped. They don't want it to go ahead. Should that happen?
Well, they're like us elected chiefs. We got to do what our members tell us to do, and they got to do what their clan tells them to do, because the clan is different than what us elected chiefs do. Because us elected chiefs represent everybody, doesn't matter what clan they're from, but we represent everybody and don't discriminate against anybody. So, and when you have a hereditary chief, they look after one clan. Like I'm a Beaver clan, so one of the hereditary chiefs is my chief.
The way I've heard it explained is that the hereditary chiefs along the pipeline route in Wet'suwet'en territory, they're responsible for the whole territory. Whereas an elected chief such as yourself, you're responsible for that parcel of land that involves your First Nation, and they have a wider responsibility to protect the land. Is that the right interpretation?
Yes, that is totally the right interpretation. But if you look at it, elected chiefs have been in politics since the Indian Act, 1876. So we've ruled a lot of the stuff that's going on, and we've created that space for hereditary systems to be recognized through the Guerin case and the Calder case, Sparrow case. You can name off a whole bunch of court cases that elected chiefs have fought for title and rights in their communities, so that the hereditary chiefs do have a say on what we do.
So if the hereditary chiefs who oppose this pipeline project are not satisfied and they continue to oppose it, do you expect that they'll be able to block this project? And is that okay with you if it's blocked because they've decided they don't want it, and that's what they've said?
No, I would go with all the Wet'suwet'en members to have a voice and have their concerns, and whatever outcomes that come from everybody's voice being heard is what I'll go with.
You've also expressed some concerns about the way this debate has blown up in the last 3 weeks to a month, and what some of the online comments we've seen. And you suggested to me just before we started that it may have set the relationship back several decades. Tell me about that.
Well, a lot of our children are starting to get bullied and discriminated against in some of the schools in northern communities. And we have a lot of really small communities, under 10,000 people, so you can really see it, and it's really relevant for us, and it's not good for our children. And that's who we need to protect, is our children.
Okay, so how do you see the way out of this conflict then, where we are on this back to this pipeline issue? You think there's a way forward that brings all voices to the table and still comes to a decision that supports the construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline? I
would, yes. And I believe that we need the economy in northern BC, because, as I stated before, that the logging industry is going down, and there's not much left for our small communities in northern British Columbia because of the mountain pine beetle epidemic that's happened over the last 20 years. Let
me finish on that. Let me come. Your band and 6 other First Nations in northern BC recently signed a partnership agreement with the BC government for forestry projects in those territories. Now, is that an agreement that could be jeopardized if hereditary chiefs were to object to it?
I believe that agreement, which is called Pathways 2.0, will not be affected because we've already passed it and signed it off through the governments. We do not have any forestry agreements yet, but we're still negotiating on getting tenure and trying to get forestry agreements.
So you don't think that could get caught up in a process about who decides what will be done with that land, the hereditary chiefs or elected band councils such as yourself?
No, I believe that one's written in stone with the provincial government, and it can't be broken whether or not the pipeline goes through. Because when we negotiated with the Liberals, and I'd like to put it out there also that with the Liberal government, we have in our agreement that they cannot convert that gas line into an oil line. Because we're adamant that we are not signing until you put that in our agreement that you cannot convert that into oil, because nobody wants oil.
Mm. All right, Chief Dan George, thank you so much for coming in today and to give us your perspective on the latest developments. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for inviting me.